Hello everyone, welcome to RTS Radio. Vous l'aurez compris, mon invité aujourd'hui est américain. Si vous avez suivi la télé dans les années 90, vous le connaissez forcément pour cette série Parker Lewis. Pour ceux qui ont regardé les séries des années 2000, alors votre référence c'est Stargate. Il est avec nous, Corinne Nemec est dans Carré VIP, c'est parti. Corinne, merci beaucoup de nous recevoir dans Carré VIP. Alors cette interview sera en français bien entendu. Corinne ne parle pas français, mais nous avons un traducteur qui est là et nous le remercions d'avance. Nous sommes toujours à la convention Manganime et c'est à cette occasion qu'on te reçoit. La première question, Corinne, va concerner justement les conventions. Est-ce que tu en fais beaucoup? Qu'est-ce que ça représente pour toi?
Being able to go to conventions similar, this one is amazing, by the way. For those of you who missed it this weekend, you just can't wait till next year. It's incredible out there. It's absolutely packed, wall-to-wall people, and a great crowd. What I like most about the events is it's a place for people who have like interests, you know, to all come and congregate in one place, you know, because I guess most people, you know, think of people who come to these conventions as nerds or whatever, and to me that's kind of a badge of honor, and I think it's fantastic that because most people interact online, you know, on the internet nowadays. So for an event like this, it gives people an opportunity, you know, to come and enjoy the things that they like and that they're into all together as a group, you know, instead of being separated.
Et le fait que ça se passe en France, dans le sud de la France, bah forcément ça m'amène cette question toute logique. Qu'est-ce que ça représente pour toi, la France, le sud de la France, Nîmes peut-être?
Well, I mean, I've been to Nice a couple of times in the past, but I don't really differentiate between like south of France and north of France because I don't know the cultural differences enough. Not like in the U.S. because I'm from the south in the U.S. and there's a big difference between the South and the northern states, you know. I'm sure it's probably the same here, but hopefully the Southerners in France don't get the bad reputation that we Southerners in the U.S. get, you know, being called rednecks and such, and white trash is a good one. Crackers, I don't know why people think that that's insulting, but cracker is one that is a common insult for Southerners.
Bon, il y en a pourtant des différences entre les gens du Sud et du Nord, mais on va pas en parler. Allez, on va parler de toi, parce que c'est ça le plus important. Et je voudrais commencer par te montrer une photo. Tu n'as pas joué dans ce film, mais je sais que ce film, il a changé beaucoup de choses pour toi. Regarde cette image.
Yes, well, my father was the art director on Goonies, so he did a lot of the set design, the design work for the movie. And it was the film that gave me the inspiration to want to become an actor, because even though the young kids in that film are a couple of years older than me, when the movie came out, I was their exact age as they were in the movie, pretty much, and so I could relate to them very, very, very strongly, and I realized, having been on sets with my father and knowing the dynamics of what it takes to make a movie or TV show, that, you know, that's what I wanted to do after I saw that movie. So it definitely holds a special place.
Et cette envie d'être acteur, elle s'est concrétisée. Tu es devenu acteur. Et le premier rôle, vous en rappelez bien sûr en France, mais aussi aux États-Unis et dans le monde entier, ben c'était cette série. On en parle. Regarde l'image.
Ah, there's the boys. Yep, Mikey, Parker, Jerry, and Coob. Good times. One of the first memories, we had a director on the show who had been arrested for drinking while driving the night before we were supposed to film, and so he couldn't make it to set on time. And we had done an episode where my father was going back to like his 60s protesting days, and he had been arrested. So we had a jail set, and so I had them take apart the jail set and build the jail around where the director works on set. Okay. So when he finally got to work, he had to direct from jail all day.
Alors ça c'est une belle anecdote. Et cette série, comment t'expliques, toi, le succès de la série Parker Lewis? Aujourd'hui, c'est l'une des séries phares, en tout cas en France, des années 90, dont on se souvient.
Well, You know, it's hard to say why it was more successful here in Europe than it was in the United States. I mean, I think that it was so successful because it was such a refreshing look at high school and comedy, and that we were doing a comedy that was only a half hour, but we're using only one camera. So we had, you know, it was like doing a film. And so I really think that it was the writing and the style and then the casting. We had such an incredible cast, great acting, great writing, great producing, great directing. You know, it was most of the directors and the writers from Parker Lewis have all gone on to do really, really big stuff. So.
Bon, il y a une autre différence aussi hein, entre la version française et la version américaine, bah, c'est la voix. Parce que dans la version française, eh ben, ce n'est pas ta voix qu'on entend. Je ne sais pas si tu as déjà eu l'occasion d'entendre ta voix française. Je vais te la faire écouter, regarde.
Synchronisation des montres. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1...
Alors justement, est-ce que tu peux nous en parler de cette voix que tu as déjà rencontrée du coup?
I mean, I think that he did a really good job. He also did my voice. He did my voice in other projects too. I believe he might have done Stargate also, the same gentleman. But he's done, why I can't remember his name right now. It's killing me. I feel so horrible because he did such a great job, and actually he's done a lot of the other work that I've done over here. But when I only met him very briefly, but what a lovely guy. He's had a really good career, even doing all of the voiceover work that he does, and he did a fantastic job bringing this character to life. You know, in a different language.
Il y a un autre personnage qu'on aimait beaucoup dans cette série. J'ai envie de te poser la question, comment va Kubiak?
Oh, I mean, he's such a lovely fellow. He always has been. He's always been a gentle giant. Even when he was in his high school days, the football coach at his school used to just beg him to play football, and he just didn't like contact sports, and he's very humble, very normal, he's had a really good career, but again, when you have somebody who's 6'7", 320 pounds, when you're casting a role, you're like, who's the biggest guy in Hollywood? Abe Ben-Ruby. So.
Il y a une autre personne qui a joué dans cette série, que vous connaissez très bien. On est dans le tout premier épisode de la série. C'est pour finir sur cette série. Regardez bien cette photo. Qui est cette personne? Vous allez la reconnaître.
Milla Jovovich. I went to real high school with her. We were actually in real high school together.
Really?
Yeah. We dated for a short time. But she's lovely. She's very, even to this day, as much success as she's had in her career, she's gotten about as big as you can get for a female actress, and especially someone coming out of being a young model. Her career has just been incredible, and she's so talented. It's not normal that models who go into acting. It's not that normal that their quality of acting is as strong as hers. Yeah, she's great. Charlize Theron is another example of that. She started out as a model and became an actress through that, and she's been great too. But Milla Jovovich, what a knockout.
En tout cas, elle était très très belle à l'époque et elle est toujours. Mais voilà, maintenant vous le découvrez, elle a commencé dans cette série. C'était l'un de ses tout premiers rôles. Bien sûr, il faut en parler. Et bien sûr, je te laisse dire ce que tu veux sur ça.
Ah, yeah, the team. There they are. Yeah, the one on the far right there with the stamp on his forehead, he used to fart a lot on set. That was his favorite thing to do, was right before they called action, he would fart really loud. And you would have to just pretend that he didn't do it. I mean, literally, they'd be like, roll camera, roll sound, and action. You'd be like, hey guys, you jerk. It was very funny.
Et du coup, est-ce que c'est ça Est-ce que c'est à ça qu'on doit le succès de la série, tu penses?
Well, is not successful. I mean, the show went for what, 11 seasons, 10 seasons, 11 seasons. I think that might be why it was successful.
Toi, t'es resté pendant 3 saisons sur cette série. Aujourd'hui, j'imagine qu'on te parle beaucoup de cette série. Est-ce qu'on te parle plus de celle-là que des autres?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, quite a number of people who will recognize me. Normally, it will be from a couple of different things, you know. And it also depends on what country I'm in, which is strange, you know. Over here, last time I was where was I? I was. I think it might have been when I was in Toulouse. I got recognized by a homeless man on the streets of Toulouse. He was completely homeless, and he came and he asked me if I had a little bit of change, and I gave him some change, and he looks at me and goes, "Parker Lewis?" And I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "What?" You know, yeah, it was hilarious because he asked me for some money, and he said that he wanted to buy beer with it, you know, and I was like, "Well, you're honest about it, so you know, here, go get a beer." And then he tripped out because of who I was, and it was very funny.
Après, parce que des séries, il y en a eu plein, hein. On cite ces deux-là, mais tu es aussi apparu dans Supernatural, Les Experts Miami, NCIS, Smallville, Beverly Hills aussi, à l'époque. Parmi tous ces rôles, est-ce qu'il y en a un que tu as retenu, une petite apparition dans une série où vraiment, je sais pas, aujourd'hui tu as envie d'en parler, c'est un rôle qui t'a marqué, un tournage qui t'a marqué?
Wow, there's been a number of them, but The Stand is definitely one. But you know, I knew that was going to be good. It's hard to say. It's the ones that you don't know what's going to happen to them. I think Parker Lewis was somewhat like that. I was really uncertain of what was the show going to be like, and then once we started shooting the episodes and I saw the show, I was blown away by it as well. Then, but the other ones, again, like Stargate, you know, I knew it was going to be a good show. There was no mystery about that. And then there's some, like, you know, like when I did Operation Dumbo Drop, which was a fantastic film, Disney film, fantastic film, great cast, and it did hardly anything in the theaters. And I thought it was a really, really lovely, great family movie. And so, you know, you can really never tell what a project is going to be like. I've done some of these low-budget action sci-fi movies that you kind of know that most of those are going to be pretty bad, but it is kind of funny because there's a few of them that I've done where, you know, fortunately, because the ones that I was a producer on as well, that I worked on from that side, I had a lot more influence over the dialogue and how we did it and the writing. And so those ones actually, I think, turned out a lot better because the problem with those low budget films is they try to be too serious, you know, and you know that it's going to be bad. You know, the computer imagery is going to be bad. You know, I mean, there's certain parts of those movies they're just going to be bad. But if you play into that, it can be good. You know, so a couple of those bad ones, like one called Sand Sharks, it's very, very funny and actually very entertaining, and another one called Dragon Wasps, which again they're ridiculous, but it's actually pretty damn entertaining. So you know.
Allez, pour terminer cette émission, vous le savez, c'est la question que je pose à chaque fois. Cette question, j'adore la poser. Tu as eu une carrière formidable, tu as encore une carrière formidable avec plein de rôles. Bien sûr, on a parlé de Parker Lewis, bien sûr, on a parlé de Stargate, mais il y en a d'autres. Quand tu étais petit, tu voulais devenir comédien. Si tu avais aujourd'hui l'occasion de remonter le temps et de t'adresser à toi quand tu étais petit, quel message tu dirais à ce petit garçon?
Oh, it's very simple. I would say to myself, quit spending money.
Et on finira sur ça. Merci beaucoup de nous avoir reçus. Thank you very much, Karim.
My pleasure.
Bye bye.